Ghosts and the paranormal are things that people have claimed to witness since the dawn of recorded history. However, no one's ever been able to capture one, and many people doubt their existence. Are you one of them? Tonight, we're going to venture into the realm of the supernatural. So grab a flashlight and get ready, because it's time to let the darkness take control. In my hometown, we have a plot of land that used to be a tuberculosis hospital, back when they would do quarantine for that. A lot of people died there, and it was kind of out of the way in the middle of the woods. It had closed down sometime in the 70s, and burnt down sometime in the 80s, from kids playing with fire. All that's left of the hospital is a big area where trees won't grow, due to the foundation. And, as a kid, this was a prime place to play manhunt, and we would regularly use the area. One of these nights we were playing, and being it, I had begun searching the area when I came across the clearing. Full moon night, practically sunlight, and I can see a single individual standing in the middle of the clearing. I lay down flat and start to sneak into the clearing, military style, thinking I've got the poor guy who doesn't even bother to hide. I'm about 30 feet away from the individual, who hadn't moved an inch to this point, when they start looking up towards the old entrance to the clearing and begins walking away. Thinking I was noticed, I stand up to give chase, but freeze solid. After just starting to walk, the individual kind of just fades away. And I'd like to blame it on being a kid, but I'm pretty sure I'd still have the same reaction. After enough time to register what happened, I run in the opposite direction, in what I assumed was a world record attempt. I get back to the safe zone and find all of my friends. I get wide eyes and am breathless trying to relay my experience. And one of the others explained what that area had been and how the whole area was supposedly haunted. Needless to say, we decided as strong men that it was kind of late and should probably call it a day. But I'd be lying if I said we didn't find a new place to play. There are a lot of disgusting people in the world that choose to live in disgusting places. My personal disdain involves your textbook hoarder. These people keep everything, and I mean everything. We get a call for a man down, unknown problem. Arrive at the house, and it's littered with stuff. You have to find a way to gain entry, as all the doors were locked, and we managed to squeeze through the back porch turned storage shed. I shit you not, this was a scene straight out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on Trash Day. Pictures of young girls taped all around the entrance, pictures of a male bending over, doing a goatsy, and a never-ending sea of crap. We back out of the house and leave the cops to start looking around, and they find no one. It turned out the neighbor reported a phantom. Me and my girlfriend at the time moved into an older 4-story house that was converted into a duplex. The basement, foyer, and attic were all common areas. My girlfriend and I lived on the 2nd floor, and we had a spare bedroom that was the computer/Nintendo/extra bedroom that we rarely used. We lived there for about a year, and always had weird feelings about the room. Sometimes, even about the entire house. One morning, while getting ready for work, a loud and realistic squeal started coming from the 2nd bedroom. My girlfriend started freaking out and yelling, so I had to convince her that there was a virus on my computer that made it do that. She was extremely gullible. Over the next couple of months, we would have some friends stay over with us in the second room, and every morning they would mention how they didn't sleep at all and could hear people walking around all night, and that it even sounded like someone was typing on my computer. I chalked it up to the cats walking on the linoleum, although I knew the cats were in our room the whole night. Jump to a couple of months later. The girlfriend and I break up, but our lease still had a month left on it, so we tried to live together for that month. I stay in the second bedroom, and one night we get into a huge fight, screaming, yelling, doors slamming, and I huff off to the second bedroom to get away from her. I could feel anger and tension and awkwardness in the room, and I assumed it was because of how upset I was. So I lay down to get some sleep, because it's 2 or 3 in the morning, and I have to work in a couple of hours. I fall asleep and wake up to a completely dark room, and I can hear something is there with me. As I sit up to examine the room, I look towards my computer and can see a young girl is standing there. She looks at me and smiles, and I quickly lay down and tell myself that my mind is messing with me. Then I say, "Screw this," out loud, and go to run out the door. Except I don't move. My body literally can't move. I try screaming, but nothing is leaving my mouth. Then I feel her. She starts walking inside of me, starting at my toes, and I can feel this girl slowly passing through my knees and my hips. She stops at my chest, and I feel her ask me, "Do you want to play?" There were no words spoken, but I felt every word that she said. Then I screamed in silence, "No!" and I felt her step through my throat and out at the top of my head. Then relaxation took over my body. I was cold, sweating, and exhausted. Too exhausted to move. All I wanted to do was curl up with my ex and feel safe, but I didn't have the energy. I fell to sleep and missed work the next day, and never spent another night in that room again. My great-grandmother, Pippi, was very independent, despite being completely blind and almost deaf. She lived by herself, with relatives coming in to help her clean and cook. She lived up in Iowa or Illinois, I can't remember which, and had a happy little life of enjoying company and listening to the cubs play. My grandmother Edith, who lived down in Mississippi, got the diagnosis of leukemia sometime in the summer of 2001, even though she was 76 at the time. She still wanted to go in for chemo and try to beat this thing. Unfortunately, although leukemia responds pretty well to chemo most of the time, it is a hard thing to try and take for a healthy person, never mind a 76-year-old woman who was already in a pretty bad way, when it comes to health anyway. So the whole family kind of knew it was just a matter of time, and Edith's daughter, including my mum, took shifts at her bedside to make sure she was comfortable and had family as she slipped away. Pippi was of course heartbroken when she heard about this. Even when your daughter is an old woman herself, you still don't expect to outlive her. One of her other daughters, Gertrude, moved in with her to make sure she was still functioning and fine. Well, the day came when Edith finally left the world, and as she did, she said, "Mum, I love you. Mom, I'll be okay. It's so beautiful. Which was insignificant until Gertrude shared this bit with us at Edith's funeral. Pippi couldn't sleep one night. She was just filled with anxiety. All of a sudden she called out, I love you, honey. Mama loves you. I'll see you soon. Be safe. And about an hour later, they got the call that Edith had died. Freaky stuff. I'm happy they were able to say goodbye though, I guess. This story is from my sister-in-law Sarah. She believed her house was haunted. Years ago, soon after Sarah and my brother-in-law were married, they bought their first house together. A very tiny 2-bedroom cabin on 5 acres. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. When they moved in, it was a tight squeeze. The washer and dryer unit was sitting right next to their kitchen stove, in a tiny thin hallway, where a grown man would have to turn sideways to fit and walk awkwardly to enter the bedrooms. All of this information is to let you know how tiny the house was, and no one could hide without being seen inside this place. While Sarah at first started to notice the occasional draft, only shortly realizing that the occasional draft would move around the house. Sarah would be cooking dinner in the front of a hot stove and suddenly become chilled. They had a wood stove for heat, and their living room was set up so that you'd be very comfortable in front of the fire. And yes, you'd be sitting there completely warm without any worry melted by the fire. Suddenly, you'd then get a cold, utterly cold feeling and feel fridged. The feeling would be there and then go. There were no open windows or ventilation that would let the wind come in from the outside. It was weatherproofed very well. This was not an old-fashioned cabin by any means. It was built about 10 years ago at the time, from the mid-80s I believe. Anyway, weird stuff would happen about every week or so. When Sarah and her husband would go out, it was very normal to go and shut off all the lights, all the windows, and have everything locked. There was no crawl space to enter the house from, and upon their return, all the lights would be flipped on. Bathroom vanity lights, the stove hood lights, every lamp and ceiling light would be on. More often than once, my brother-in-law would enter first to inspect their home, only to find nothing. This house had zero background of horrific murders, no native burial sites, or even natural deaths on the property, so no one was quite sure what it could have been. Through the first 5 years of owning their home, a lot of odd occurrences became something like a background noise. You knew it was there, but didn't bother paying any attention to it, except for the doors. After a while of nearly forgetting the entity, the doors started opening on their own, like never before. The entrance door and the back door, as well as the bedroom doors, bathroom doors and cupboards, were all being found open when they weren't before. Sarah hates closed doors, a thing from a past where having a closed door just gave her the creeps, and all the bedroom doors would be closed when she had left them open. The kitchen cabinets were the opposite, all left open. Well, she took care of that, and just had all the doors removed, then replaced with curtains. Whether those were left open or closed didn't bother her much, and things were quiet for a long time, until they brought their newborn son home, when all of a sudden she felt a cold spot behind her after putting the baby down. Maybe a hasted light flicker when walking through the house with her son. The doorway curtains would suddenly swish lightly, as if someone had opened the front and let in a breeze. Again, my in-laws did everything to just ignore it, but it never harmed anyone or anything. It never touched them or destroyed anything of theirs. The entity was just there, though finally, it did cross a boundary. Sarah one day went to take a quick shower. She put her son on the bed surrounding him, with barrier pillows at the center of the bed, and stepped away. She could easily see him from where the bathroom was positioned, and after rinsing shampoo from her hair, she looked suddenly at her son. All the pillows were placed back in proper order at the head of the bed, and her son was flipped onto his belly at the edge of the mattress. There was no way her infant could move like that. He was only a month old. And to put all the pillows back? No. She had it. She started shouting, "Okay, we know you're here and your welcome is over. You have to leave to find peace. I don't want you touching my baby. And I don't want you here." After that it was gone. Seriously. They never again had any other experiences. They've done extensive construction to the home as well since then, and it's not even similar to the original, and still no reoccurrences have happened. My in-laws speculate that it was just a spirit that needed to be told to pass on, a spirit that was lost and somehow wandered into their home. My stepdad's experience was in the year 1982. He was about 12 years of age when his family, my stepdad's dad, his younger brother Ethan, and his older sister Mary, and their mother and father, moved into a 3-bedroom, 2-story house. The house was already about 50 years old, and my stepdad remembers the dated look of the place, with those crystal glass door handles and the faux marble linoleum. The layout of the house starts with the staircase at the front of the home, a little to the right of where you'd enter through the front door. My stepdad and his little brother had a bedroom on the 2nd floor at the beginning of the stairwell to the right. His parents' room was on the left side, just a little ways down a hall, past the hall closet and the 2nd-story bathroom. On the 1st floor past the stairs, there was the tiny stairway closet, then his sister Mary's room, which was directly under my stepdad's and Ethan's room. Across from Mary's room was the 2nd bathroom, then a short walk that led to the living room, with an open divider that separated the living room from the kitchen. My stepdad explained that he knew the house was haunted after the 1st month. The excuses of, "It's a new place, old houses make noise," were the first to his mind when anything squeaked, creaked, clicked, or seemed to make the floor groan. That only lasted for so long, until you needed answers. He wasn't concerned to ask, so he had no answers. My stepdad went on acting as if everything was normal. Then, his little brother began venting one day. "Hey, could you try and be quiet when I'm sleeping? I wake up to you almost every night shuffling to the bathroom and closing the doors." My stepdad said, "It's not me. You hear them too then? The doors and footsteps in the hallway?" "Yeah, almost every night. But if it's not you, is Mary coming up here then?" The brothers went downstairs to ask their sister, and Mary explained that she had thought it had been them. And just like Ethan said, Mary had also heard the footsteps every night. "I've gone up to tell both of you to get back to bed many times in the past, but none of you are up. You're both sound asleep. Even once I thought one of you was coming down the stairs at midnight. I came out of my room to check, and no one was there. Okay, let's ask Mum, suggested Ethan. So after asking their mother, she confirmed the noises. A call to the landlord got them a solid and quick answer. A single elderly woman lived alone in the house. She mainly kept to herself with a couple of neighbours who would come to make welfare checks. She passed away from a fall down the staircase, and the landlord explained the cause of death was head trauma from the fall. So, with a death on the property, it confirmed to my stepdad and his family that they were living in a genuine haunted house. Living with her ghost wasn't scary at all for him and his siblings. It seemed, well, normal, after they'd received confirmation anyway. Their ghost came to be called Granny. She never physically touched or hurt anyone. She didn't just reside in one place in the home. To my stepdad's family, they noticed Grandma would shuffle around the house, checking into rooms and then closing the doors. At night, she was most active when my stepdad would hear her move slowly up the stairs, into the bedrooms. He wouldn't move but only listen to the shuffling for about a minute or two, making her rounds through the rooms as she approached. Both him and his brother were at their bedsides and gingerly pulling up their quilts and, over their shoulders, tucking them in. Granny would shuffle around a bit more before leaving the room and closing their bedroom door behind her, then continue on her route around the house. My stepdad told one friend called Ben that his house was haunted. Ben was only humoured but didn't believe him. All right, stay the night if you don't believe me. So Ben took his offer up and came on Friday evening. Of course, nothing in the early evening, but once it came time for bed, Ben stood with him at the bottom landing of the staircase. Ben watching intently, as if he was waiting to catch someone pranking him, and my stepdad listening and waiting for Granny to start her rounds. Sure enough, soft creaks were being heard down the end of the hallway. Then the turning of a doorknob started, the door swishing open, then being closed back shut, and soft footsteps continuing. Ben was ready to call his mum. He didn't stay the night, or any night after that. The family lived in the house for over 2 years, until it came time to relocate for employment. My stepdad felt no negativity while living there. Granny was just a sweet spirit who hadn't found her way to the other side, and tenderly looked out for him and his siblings during the evenings. The many tenants after his family never resided long in the home. New renters would live there for a month or two, before they would pack up and leave. After so many tenants left, the landlord sold the property. The new owner decided to demolish the house. The roadway was widened and a new home was built further back on the original plot. That's his story. My stepdad is a believer without a doubt when it comes to the paranormal. I had just turned 22, and my parents had sold their house and purchased a place out in the country. On the property, there was a big shed not far from the house that I decided to turn into my place. Now, I kind of felt uncomfortable in the shed sometimes, but my dog kept me company, so it wasn't that bad. Anyway, I'd been there maybe 2 weeks, and one night, I'm on the computer, and my dog is asleep at my feet, and I feel the need to pee. So I get up and go outside to do my business. It's a beautiful clear night, and the stars were incredible. When the next thing I hear, the shed door slams shut behind me. I turn immediately and try and open it, but it will not budge. Now, from the inside of the shed, I can hear my dog start to growl, quietly at first, and then louder. Now he's barking, and I'm panicking trying to get the door open. I must mention that I'm a 6'5" person and built very well. I play sports, but even ramming my full weight into the door won't budge. And I'm really panicking now, as my dog's barks started turning into whines, then whimpering, and then silence. And with all my might I slam into the door and it flies open. The light is off inside now, and it's pitch black. It won't turn back on, and I'm in complete darkness. I can't see my dog anywhere, and I stumble around trying to find a torch. Finally, I find it, and pick it up and turn on my flashlight, and wasn't prepared for what I would see next. My dog had literally squashed herself into the furthest, darkest corner of the room, eyes closed and shaking violently. I immediately moved towards her, and as soon as I got within reach, she leapt into my arms and wouldn't move. I picked her up, and I swear I've never ran so fast in my damn life. I never stepped foot in that shed again, and my dog wouldn't even go near that part of the property. I don't know what happened in that shed that night, but I'll never forget it, and I avoid sheds now. Several years ago, while I was a freshman in high school, my dog died of an inoperable tumour in his liver. Fast forward 6 or 8 months. I'm home alone. My brother was just hospitalised, beginning his 2 years. 1-month journey of near-death surgeries and recovering. My parents were working, so I was home alone by myself, as I'd just gotten off rehearsal. I went to the kitchen to find some food, and took it to my room to eat. When I was just outside my door, I had a strange feeling that someone was behind me, and that I wasn't alone in the house. Turning around, I saw no one was there. Before I entered my room, I caught a glimpse of a misty figure at about knee level. I was slightly creeped out, but just brushed it off as nothing. I go to my room and sit on my bed, with the door closing behind me, but not completely shut. I was on my bed staring at the door, still in disbelief about what I'd seen, and suddenly, the door pushes itself gently open, slightly, just like my dog used to do. At that point I wasn't scared, but more comforted in the fact that he was still there with me. It's a weird feeling, but if you've ever experienced it, you'd understand what I mean. I eventually told my mum what happened, several weeks later, and she said she'd been experiencing strange things as well. When we got a new dog, who was a 4-month-old pup at the time, she would also stare at things curiously. One time she was staring at the curtains for a long time, but staying where she was, and the curtains began moving gently, as if someone had touched them. There was no draft right there, as I found out after. I miss that sweet boy of mine. We rescued him from a life as an abandoned and mistreated dog, and was very loyal and protective of the entire family. Although this story wasn't as creepy as the others, I still feel that my experience justifies why I believe in ghosts and residual energy. My mother, my daughter and I live together in the United States. It's generally a nice set of apartments here, but like in any neighborhood, there are a few bad seeds, but for the most part, there are just ordinary, hard-working good people. I do have some stories to tell about the upstairs neighbor. That guy was a crazy drug dealer, but this story is about my daughter's experience. During the following events, she was only 3 years old, and my job would require me to work the night shift as an inventory manager. So consequently, my mother would look after my daughter and drop her off at daycare in the morning, as of course, I would barely just be getting home. There would occasionally be rare times where I would finish work early and get to see her more, as well as the days I took off to spend more time with her. It was on a night where I was working that was the genesis of the events that followed. I was in my office when suddenly my cell phone begins to ring. I look down to see it's my mother, and I pick up immediately. I could tell that something was off. Her voice sounded worried, and she was telling me that she could hear wailing coming from a neighbour's house. And shortly after, there were several cop cars and an ambulance parked outside. She couldn't see anything, but there was a palpable feeling of dread that loomed in the air. It wasn't until next morning that we saw on the news that a woman living on the same complex as us was stabbed to death by her ex-boyfriend yesterday. As tragic as that was, I had no idea that the incident would affect my family in the way it did. Now, I need to describe the layout of the apartment, as it is important to understand the story. If you look down the hallway from my mother's room, you can see into the kitchen and the open living room, and from there, you can also see into my room. As time went by, my mother and I would notice that my daughter would act a little strange from time to time. She never wanted to be left alone, and would regularly stare at empty spaces as if she was zoned out staring at something. Not only that, she seemed to get scared for no apparent reason. We'd always ask her if she were okay, and she'd say that she was fine. I was off from work one day a few weeks later, and after playing some games with my daughter, I noticed that she looked pretty tired. So I put on a movie for her in my mother's room as I washed the dishes to lull her into a nap. I went down the hallway into the kitchen to start washing the dishes, and after a few minutes, I see her walking down the hallway. I thought she was going to ask for a snack, but she passed me with her head tilted, as if she were following something into the living room, then into our room. Perplexed, I stopped what I was doing and I walked out of the kitchen into the living room. I called her name softly, but she didn't respond, and stood for a few moments in the front of our room, staring intently at the emptiness. I was getting a little bit concerned. It was almost as if she were in a trance of some kind, when then suddenly, she turns back and crawled to me so that I could pick her up. I asked her what was wrong and what she was looking at, but she just stared back at me with a scared look on her face, staring into the empty abyss of the room. I was bewildered, and after I calmed her down and put her to bed, I told my mother about the incident. A few weeks passed, and it was a night that I would have to work, so before I left, I prepared some dinner and snacks for her, as well as set up a movie in the living room for the evening. As I was doing this, she was in her playpen. I had little time to spare before I left work, and was a little tired, so I sat on the sofa and put a blanket on me to relax for a few minutes before I left. I was just at the point of nodding off when I heard her footsteps from behind me as she called out to me. "Mummy?" I replied whilst keeping my eyes closed. "Go away," she said in a very soft but serious tone. I was confused. I opened my eyes to see her facing away with her back towards me. "Go away," She repeated herself. I was half asleep and confused. It was as if she was talking to nothing. But before I could fully comprehend the situation, she hurried over under the covers with me on the couch. I held her tightly until we fell asleep in each other's embrace. Next night at work, I mulled over everything. I was getting concerned and putting together the events that had transpired when I got hit by a strong urge to call my mother. I can't describe it, but I picked up the phone and asked her to burn some sage in her room before she went to bed. As the nights that I'm away, she will sleep with her. A few hours later, at 5 a.m, I get a call from my mother. She is manic and telling me to get home now. I rush home and see her and my daughter crying outside. I ask them what's going on, and my mother tells me that she is not stepping foot into the house until it's cleansed. She tells me that she forgot to burn the sage, and that night she had a dream that she was walking down the hallway to the kitchen and realized she had no idea why she was going there in the first place. So she turned around to go back to her room, but there was something keeping her from opening the door. She wasn't sure what it was, but it filled her with pure dread and felt her stomach drop as she remembered that my daughter was still in the room. It was at that very moment she woke up because my daughter was screaming bloody murder. I entered the apartment and started burning sage. I stated out loud, "I think I know who you are, and I'm sorry about your death, but my daughter is only 3 years old and you are scaring her. Please, stop. You need to move on." After that, my daughter never acted strange again. I'm convinced that the poor woman who was murdered was clinging onto this world. But I'm not sure why she fixated on my daughter. I hope she found her peace. This happened a couple of years ago, when I was still in high school. It was the middle of winter, and my boyfriend and I decided that we were going to go pick up a couple of friends and take a drive out of town to get baked. We drove about 15 minutes away from town to an area near the lake and found a good area to spark up. We were a little away into the woods where nobody could see the lights from the truck. That way, we could leave the truck running to keep warm. We proceeded to load the bung and take a few takes before heading back to town to grab some munchies. Now, I know you're probably thinking, why the hell were you driving out of town to smoke weed? Well, I live in a small town in Alberta, Canada, and we were a bunch of paranoid teenagers who didn't want to be caught smoking weed. So, we went elsewhere. But I digress. We finished smoking and drove back to town. We were heading to McDonald's, which is on the opposite end towards where we drove in. We drove off the main road and down a couple of streets towards the trucker's route to McDonald's. But something super weird happened on one of those roads. I can absolutely say that what we saw had nothing to do with the fact that we were all baked, because we all saw the same exact thing, and it freaked us out profoundly. So my boyfriend turned on this road, and as I looked out of the passenger side window, I noticed this guy walking on the sidewalk in the opposite direction of where we were heading. He wore a black hoodie and a pair of jeans, but no jacket. Let me just say that midwinter in Alberta is extremely cold. On this night, it was about -23°C, and snowing pretty good. This guy was not dressed for the weather, but then again, a lot of people around here are either too stupid to dress for the weather, or too poor to afford it, so I didn't think anything of it at first. We were driving a bit slower due to road conditions, but not by much, and we were getting closer to passing the guy on the sidewalk, when suddenly, he turned towards the road in the direction of the truck, and started to speed up. I screamed at my boyfriend to watch out, and to avoid the guy, but before I could finish my sentence, he ran right into the front passenger side of the truck. However, where we should have heard and felt the impact of his body, as he threw himself against the truck, there was nothing. No sound, no impact, and when we all looked to see if he was okay, he was gone. And when I say gone, I mean non-existent. There were no footprints leading to the truck, and there was no body. It was as if he had just vanished into thin air. I looked back at everybody, and asked if they had just seen what happened, and everyone nodded their heads in disbelief. I told my boyfriend to drive away, and that's when everyone started to freak out. Like this experience wasn't freaky enough, the fact that we were all high out of our trees made it even freakier. But it was not a trick of the mind. Despite being high, we all witnessed the very same thing. We never did get our munchies, but we all decided it would be far better if we all went home instead. I never found out who the guy was, where he went, or if he was even real. But I hope that I never have to experience anything like that again. A little bit of background info. I am a 23-year-old female living in Brisbane, Australia. Throughout my life, I've had quite a few experiences with the paranormal, but that's a different story. A couple of months back, my boyfriend, my mother and I went to a tour of an old jail that had been closed for many years. Due to anonymity, I won't name the jail, but anyone that lives in Brisbane or Queensland would have heard of this place. It was notorious for being one of the most brutal jails in Australia, and people dreaded being sent there due to the stories that they heard. Now, originally, it was 3 buildings, A, B, and C. Building A had been closed down for a lot longer than the other 2, and had been used to house the gallows. There were 42 people sentenced to death here, 39 men, 2 teenagers, and 1 woman. This building was demolished years ago, and there is a lot of research showing, whether you believe it or not is a different story, that spirits are drawn to familiarity, especially those that died in a horrific way, or have unfinished business, not allowing them to move on. These spirits are drawn to buildings, like B for example, being the men's block, and C being the women's block, and they were extremely similar. Now, before we went into the jail, I was feeling fine, but the moment I entered, I felt this uneasy feeling of dread overcome me. Also, my flashlight kept playing up all night, and this was at night, and as soon as we walked out of the jail, the flashlight worked perfectly. So obviously, we're walking around exploring this place, and I was taking pictures of everything. I didn't look at these photos for a few days until afterwards, but when I did, of the 40 photos I took, two of them seemed to have what looked like orbs in them. The whole time we were walking around, we had this feeling of dread, and I continually had a feeling of being watched, and this was only intensified when we walked into Building C. The tour guide we were with was telling us about the woman that was hung in the gallows. The group that we were with was standing in a kind of circle against the wall of the cell block, but I was standing a little back from everyone with my boyfriend, and on the left of me was my mother, but neither of them were close enough to touch me. So as we were talking about the day that she was hung from the gallows, I suddenly felt as if something was being put around my neck, and I felt being restrained. Then, just as he was talking about the floor being dropped from under her, the feeling around my neck got tighter and tighter, until I felt I couldn't breathe anymore, and there was nothing I could do. As soon as we were finished talking about her, the feeling of tightness around my neck loosened, and I could finally move again. I looked around, and there was nobody behind me, and nobody around me. My mum and boyfriend couldn't have touched me. This has never happened to me before or since, and there's no way I can make sense of it. I literally felt like I was reliving what that woman had felt, and nothing has ever scared me so much in my life before. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's installment of Paranormal Stories. It's one of my favourite topics, and I personally would love to see a ghost one day. I haven't yet, but do hold hope that perhaps one day, one of them will appear. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to drop a like and hit the subscribe button for more spooky stories every day. Of course, you can always leave a comment too with your thoughts, as they're always read and very much appreciated. Don't forget to also hit the little bell icon to be up to date of everything I post. I also would like to give a big shout out to my friend Briefcase, who has covered another horrific incident. Trust me, it's a really good story. So when you're done with this one, follow the link on screen or in the description and go give it a listen. Some truly horrific stuff. Get yourself ready as well, because he and I are sorting out a very big collaboration very soon. So get to know his channel, get to know his voice, and prepare yourself. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.